Yesterday, Riot kicked things off for the new reveal season by giving us 3 new cards from the upcoming Champion expansion. Now, all signs point to that expansion being released with the upcoming in-game event. If you look at the calendar, that is slated for July 14th. So we should be expecting reveals slowly until that happens. The event, again, very likely to be the Ruination event. All of the Runeterra based games, or at least that's the way I like to describe it. So we're talking League of Legends, Teamfight Tactics, and Legends of Runeterra. They're all taking part in this shared Ruination event. So today we got 4 new cards. They're all dragon themed, which I find to be very interesting. And specifically, 2 of them are from Shadow Isles, which is not a region that you traditionally associate with the dragon archetype. And I am excited about them. I can't wait to dive in and talk about them because the Shadow Isles dragons also, I think, are very, very cool and very well designed. So we're going to start with Crawling Viper Worm, which is a 2-cost 3/2 dragon from Shadow Isles. It's a dragon, so it naturally has that Fury keyword, but it says on play, I strike an ally or I deal 3 to your nexus. Now, I adore this design. I think this is really, really cool. It doesn't matter if this card ends up being like amazing or playable. This design is so clean because it takes everything you want from the dragon archetype and everything you want from the Shadow Isles region identity and perfectly blends them together. So what do I mean by that? Well, dragons like to strike things, okay? We've got cards like Dragon Chow already that when you play a dragon, your dragons strike it, and that's because they have the Fury keyword. You want them to kill things so that they get bigger. So you could look at this and say, okay, well, this is just pretty standard. I'm going to play this. It's going to kill one of my own units. That's a Shadow Isles thing. But because it's strike and not just destroy or kill or slay like a Spirit Leech, like a Bladed Caretaker, it means that this also gets the benefit from that Fury keyword. So this, if it's played on turn 2 and it's eating, let's say, a token made from Wings in the Wave, for example, it's going to be a 2-cost 4/3 dragon. So you're going to get that bonus. Also, if you are playing this in a dedicated dragon deck, it's the dragon dealing the damage when it strikes. So later on, if you've got a Shyvana on the board, this is going to help you with leveling her up. It counts as a dragon dealing damage. So you get the best of both worlds with this design, but then you also get to take it even further because you also have the option of combining this with the Slay archetype without dragons in general. You still get all of those benefits, or you could play it in other archetypes and just try to mitigate that drawback. So if this strikes something with barrier, then you get a dragon and you don't lose your unit. Maybe that is something you need to do. Or if you just need bodies for blocking, maybe you strike something with 5 or 6 health so that you can go wide with your blockers and still end up with another body. Or, and this is the other part I love about this design, you can just take damage to your nexus. Now, there's going to be cases where you don't want to do that against certain aggressive decks and so on and so forth, but against, say, control decks where you're trying to be the beatdown, being able to instead just say, you know what, I'm going to take 3 because it doesn't matter anyway, I'm going to lose to their big combo or whatever, and I'm going to play more units. And so I love that. I also love that by dealing damage to your own nexus, while it doesn't exist in the game, you could set up other future mechanics. Maybe in the future, from a design standpoint, we get something that cares about our own nexus health. Maybe there's something that triggers when we're at 10 or less. Think of it as like the reverse Darius, right? Normally with Darius, you want to punch the enemy nexus in the face, get them down to 10 or less. But we could have something that's meant to be like either a comeback mechanic or maybe a high risk, high reward mechanic where when you're at less than 10, or maybe it's even something more ridiculous, like less than 5 health, you know, certain units get bonuses or whatever the case may be. And this could be a way in the future to self-trigger them. It just opens up a lot of design opportunities. I love this mechanic. I adore, again, that it specifically is the unit striking. That also matters for buffing things in your hand, or if it's gaining buffs when it comes into play. So if for whatever reason in the future we give it the ability to gain lifesteal while it's in the hand, then when you play this, it would strike, you gain that lifesteal as well because it's the dragon striking. Or again, if you've leveled a Zoe and just all sorts of weird things are happening, maybe it's gaining other relevant keywords where it's going to care about the fact that this is doing the striking. But just overall, I love the clean design. It does everything you want a dragon to do, on top of everything that you want from Shadow Isles, as far as chewing through your own units, getting those slays, maybe setting up triggering your own black spear, whatever the case may be. So I don't know if the card is necessarily going to be good, because I think ultimately it's going to depend on how much more support Shadow Isles can offer to a dragon archetype. Obviously, Targan and Demacia have been paired together for a long time, because Targan offers a lot of late game and defensive options, which works really well with dragons. And obviously Targan has other dragons, which is really helpful in a dragon archetype. So this introduction of dragons to another region is something worth keeping an eye on. And obviously Shadow Isles is a really powerful region, and it has been since the game has launched, essentially. So there could very well be something there as far as an archetype goes. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But I just love the design of this card. Could go on and on about it, because the striking thing is just beautiful. You could even go as far as to do really awkward non-meta things, if you will, and you could use this to power Braum into leveling him, for example. If your opponent's not giving you great ways to get damage on Braum for him to regen, maybe you just start beating him in the face with your own dragons. This could be a great way to damage your own Soraka to get bonuses for healing and setting up a Star Springs. Do I expect that to be the proper use for these? Absolutely not. But again, the fact that those kinds of interactions exist is just something that I enjoy, and so I like the design. I promise I'm done talking about that, though. We're going to move on to the next card. The next card is Ruined Dragon Guard. So this is a 3-cost 2/4 in Demacia, and it says when an ally with Fury kills a unit, grant it an additional +1/+1. So this card is, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't think it's that good, and I'll try to explain as best my reasoning here. You're getting a 2/4 body with no relevant keywords. I think the natural card that you're going to compare this to is something like Laurent Protégé, where you can pay 3 and you get a 2/4, but it's a 2/4 with Challenger, and that allows you to be proactive. Usually you can get one value trade against something that was played on 1 and 2 and leave yourself with a blocker or whatever. This, it comes down and it blocks all right, but it's really planning for the future, and I think you need to get at least 2 triggers out of it to offset the lack of a keyword and really feel like you got your, mana's worth, if that makes sense. Now that's entirely possible, because if you're doing the traditional on curve stuff, you play this on 3, then maybe on 4 you play Shyvana, and then on 5 you play a Screeching Dragon. And if Shyvana eats like a Dragon Chow, so if you play a Dragon Chow on 1 or 2, Dragon Guard on 3, and Shyvana on 4, that really helps out your Shyvana, because you're killing the Chow, which you already want to do a Shyvana anyway in terms of trying to help level her up, but now she's just growing even more. And then Screeching Dragon's kind of in that same boat. Usually that thing comes down and then it eats at least 1 unit, and so if it gets an extra +1/+1, I think that's where the real value lies for me personally, is combining this with Screeching Dragon, because it has Challenger and a relatively high health to begin with, so you can get yourself in a position where it can just kind of keep eating units and staying much healthier, as opposed to like eating 1 unit and being like the 5-cost version of Protégé, where it eats 1 unit and dies. So there is some value there, but it's sort of like a long-term investment that I don't think is worth just playing otherwise a very vanilla 3-cost 2/4, because Protégé again is very active, and this also has to survive long enough for you to get those bonuses. So that means that even if you are using this as a blocker, you can't kill it, you can't let it perish, or you're just not getting those bonuses, and then you're going to feel bad. So I feel like this is probably not good enough to crack the lineup, but again, I do really like the possible synergy with it. I think this also really shines once you start adding in the strikes So if you are going really heavy with, you know, concerted strike, strafing, single combat, etc., then maybe this is enough of a bonus to really focus on the dragons. Perhaps that does offset it, but I don't know. I have a really hard time paying 3 for a vanilla 2/4 is what it comes down to. I see all of the synergy. I like what it's trying to do. I kind of really like the idea of what this does if there are multiples on the board, but if you get to the point where you've got multiple, you know, 3-cost 2/4s that aren't doing much else on the board and you're still in a safe spot, you were probably already winning anyway. Your opponent's not doing anything to you. You're not generating pressure. So even though I like the idea of that for big flashy moments, it's still just not something I expect. And so ultimately, I don't feel like this is one of the cards that will likely crack the lineup unless there are other things that we see pop up where this becomes worth it. This is in many ways to me like a dragon version of Dawn Speakers, and Dawn Speakers was really good when the game released, but the pace of the game is just too fast now. Now I will say something kind of funny about this card. I think if this card existed in the previous meta, so before this last expansion, it might have actually seen play. The 4 health to block with would have been very relevant against Azarelia in the first couple of turns, and allowing your dragons that were already kind of being played because they were seen as like infinite blockers, but allowing them to also start scaling. So the idea of like you block with Shyvana and she gets +2/+2, you block with a Screeching, it gets +2/+2. Actually might have been good enough against that deck, but because the meta is so diverse now on the ladder and you can't guarantee on that matchup, I'm not sure that Dragon Guard is worth it. But if we ever get a very tightly packed meta again like we just had previously, there's a chance that this card could shine in the right situations. So next up we have Camavoran Dragon. Camavoran Dragon. I do not know what the proper pronunciation is, but this is a 4-cost 4/3 dragon in Shadow Isles. It has Fearsome and Fury. On play, I strike an ally or I deal 3 to your Nexus. So just like the Viper Worm, again, I love that design. So you have to think that this could be a 4-cost 4/3 Fearsome Fury, or if you're chewing through one of your feeder units, it also could be a 4-cost 5/4 Fearsome Fury, which is very relevant. You know, with the introduction of these dragons, I can't help but think about the recent nerf to the Abomination, where they took it from a 4/3 to a 4/2 off of Cursed Keeper. And perhaps it was looking ahead because of the dragons and things that we're getting. I mean, let's be honest, that card's been busted since launch. That thing used to make a 4/4. It's still entirely playable making a 4/2. But anyway, here we are. But this also has a really neat extra bit of text. At least I think it's neat. It says, when I slay a unit, drain 1 from the enemy Nexus. And so this dragon is competing with Shyvana in that 4 slot, but it is still something that is very, very funny with Dragon Chow and feeder units. So if you can imagine a scenario where you play like a Dragon Chow on 1 and a Cursed Keeper that I was just talking about on 2, and then, you know, Camavoran Dragon comes down on 4, you choose the play effect to strike your Cursed Keeper. So it'll enter play, it will strike the Cursed Keeper, it'll get bigger, it'll make your token, and it'll drain 1 from the enemy Nexus. So they lose 1, you gain 1. It'll kill the Dragon Chow, it'll get bigger, it'll drain 1 from the enemy Nexus. Like, you can kind of see where this could be ridiculous. At that point, you're looking at a 6/5 Fearsome with Fury. You've drawn a card off your Dragon Chow, and every time this slays, it drains 1. And then that's not even counting pairing it with strikes. So I was just talking about with Dragon Guard over there, how maybe things could start firing off with strikes. Well, this is a dragon that you really do want to strike with. It doesn't full on have lifesteal. It's not as amazing as, you know, getting that concerted strike off with your Radiant, for example, but still using this with single combat, with concerted strike, with strafing, whatever the case may be, allows you to get a little bit of healing, a little bit of poke, and that starts to add up. And if you get multiples of these up and running, I think that you can really put your opponent into awkward positions. So I really like this. I also like it because traditionally, just in general, dragons are an archetype that really require you to kind of dominate the board because they don't really have reach. They don't have burn damage that's going to go toward the nexus. But if you go this Shadow Isles route, then maybe this is enough, because a lot of times with burn, you really only need to deal total of like 4 or less to try to finish somebody off. I could see you getting that throughout the course of a game with this dragon, for sure. When you factor in all of the strikes and everything else, and if you're playing it with Demacia, Demacia is already getting all of these tools to also allow it to have Challenger, for example. So you could give this thing Challenger and then run around and have a heyday with it. You could play cards like Cataclysm with it, all sorts of things. So I think that this card is neat. This might be my favorite of the reveals from today anyway, because it's the one where I want to deck build around it the most. Just like the Den Mother of yesterday, this Camavoran Dragon today is the one where I say, okay, that's enough for me to start thinking about all the different ways that I could maybe utilize this. So I like this card a lot, and I'm looking forward to playing some Shadow Isles dragons. Next up, though, we have Cadrigan. I never can say it right. Cadrigan. It's the R in grin. I want to say Cadrigan every time, but it's the R that trips me up. Cadrigan, the Ruined. So this is not the big one that is buffing all of your dragons everywhere. This is instead a 6-cost 6/6 Demacian dragon. It's a dragon, so it has the Fury keyword, and on play you grant an allied champion or dragon Challenger. So I was just talking about all the different ways that you could give that Camavoran dragon Challenger that exists in Demacia, and then they go and say, oh, by the way, here's another one if you want to use it. But that's the big issue here, right? Do you want to use it? So normally I would say that I'm not very thrilled with this card, because I think in a traditional dragon deck, you're talking Demacia and Targan, I think it's a hard fit. It's a 6-cost 6/6. Yes, it's got Fury, but that's not like the super relevant keyword here. Now, it could grant an allied champion or a dragon Challenger, but in a more traditional dragon deck, so thinking the Targan version, Screeching Dragon already has Challenger. Shyvana is kind of nice to have it. And then all of your other dragons are going to be more expensive than this. So you're talking about things like Eclipse or even Aurelian Soul. And so it makes this a very awkward play. And then even further, if you go into more like mid-rangey decks that sometimes play other dragons, they might play like Screeching or things like that. This is not as good as some of the more generic Demacia 6-drops, because those are very, very good. You're thinking Cythria, the Scout, and I would say, again, traditionally, this would have a hard time fitting in those decks. But when you see these Shadow Isles dragons pop up, if you are planning to run Shadow Isles with Demacia and playing a new dragon deck from that archetype, you have to now consider that you're not running the Targan ones. And so this is, in my mind, not really competing with the other 6-drops, but this would instead be like what you would play in place of Eclipse Dragon, because you're still going to need a certain number of dragons, both for the Shyvana synergies, but also so that you can run things like your 3/2 and have it behold the dragon to get Challenger. And so if you would normally have 3 Eclipse Dragons in your deck, maybe this helps fill that void. Now, I don't think, do not misunderstand me here, I don't think this card is anywhere near the same power level of Eclipse Dragon, because that card is very versatile and it either speeds up your big win con champion by 2 rounds, or it can help refill your hand with an insane Nightfall trigger, right? So I think Eclipse Dragon's very, very good. I don't think this is on par in terms of that, but I think that in a Shadow Isles version where you are not running Eclipse Dragon, this might still be an okay void filler to make sure you have the tag to, again, maybe give this Camavoran Dragon Challenger, or I'm assuming in this archetype you'd also be running the Crawling Viper Worm. So maybe even just granting that, you know, if that does come into play and you hit the strike and it is a 4/3, even just giving that challenger can sometimes be a relatively big deal. So I don't think that this card would have been good enough to crack traditional lineups, but I think it's worth considering or keeping your eye on for this kind of potential looming Shadow Isles Demacia Dragon deck. I think we're gonna have to see what else is revealed going forward before we make a hard decision there, but this kind of like mini package feels good. It gets me excited and makes me want to deck build, and as I've said before, and I'll say it again until I die, if you can make me get excited about deck building and theory crafting, then you've done a good job. So that's it. That's today's reveals. As I said, my personal favorite is the Camavorn Dragon because it's the one that I think is most likely to be worth the investment. There's just a lot of text on it and a lot of keywords on it for a 4-drop, and it does everything you want from a dragon and everything you want out of a Shadow Isles card. So I think that it's worth investigating at a minimum, but I want to hear from you as always. Are you excited about this new kind of looming dragon package? Do you think that, I would say this, do you think that what's revealed today is enough to warrant venturing into a Shadow Isles and Demacia Dragon package, or do you think that it's going to need, you know, 1 or 2 more cards to get revealed before the expansion launches? That's what I want to know. Do you think this is enough? If you made it this far, I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing if you're new, and until next time, may you walk on warm sands.